This podcast is brought to you by the Albany Public Library main branch and the generosity of listeners like you. What is a podcast? God, Daddy, these people talk as much as you do. Razib Khan's Unsupervised Learning.
Thanks for listening to the ungated version of the Unsupervised Learning podcast. If you want to read some essays on some of these topics, please check out razib.substack.com. Again, that's razib.substack.com. Thank you.
Hey everyone, this is Razib with the Unsupervised Learning podcast, and I'm here today to talk about artificial intelligence, which I think a lot of you guys have heard about, but mostly you're on ChatGPT or Grok or whatever, trying to get your homework done or whatever you want to do. It's gonna be a little deeper and a little harder than a little darker, maybe I'll say, a conversation, but we'll see. I'm here with Nate Soares, who is the president of the Machine Learning Institute?
Machine Intelligence Research Institute.
MIRI, Machine Intelligence Research Institute. Yes, I know the acronym better than what it stands for. I just know it's machine, but I know Nate a little bit, IRL. We have a lot of mutual friends. I kind of move in the same circles, so not totally a mystery to me who you are, but you co-authored a book, which you have been, you've been on various shows that I've actually seen, promoting it. If anyone builds it, everyone dies. Why superhuman AI would kill us all. The co-author is someone named Eliezer Yudkowsky, who I also know Eliezer. And I did a Blogging Heads with him in 2010. So I've already had a conversation with Eliezer, and we've talked about various things. I think actually some of them relate to the book because some of these ideas are not just newly formed. Eliezer is he's a character, is what I'm going to say, and he has been kind of profiled in the New York Times. Science fiction author, Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality. A lot of the listeners will know about that. I don't want to go on about Eliezer because it's not about Eliezer, it's about the book. But it's also not about you. But can you just introduce yourself with your background and how you got into this line of work so people know who the co-author is?
Yeah, 2010 is even earlier than when I had figured out about these issues. I sort of noticed that AI was going to be a potential issue in late 2012. And then, I started attending workshops at MIRI in 2013. Before that, I was at Microsoft and then Google. I actually helped build Google Cloud Compute. And then in 2014, there was, I didn't think there were enough people working on trying to make AI go well. So I joined the Machine Intelligence Research Institute. And then by 2015, I was running the place. So I've been in this line of work for over 10 years, basically trying to make AI go well. And it has not been looking great for the home team, hence the book.
Yeah, I mean, just a little lore, as they would say, as the youth would say. I was hanging out in the Bay Area rationalist circle starting in 2008. That's when I met Eliezer Yudkowsky in person, in real life, IRL, as they say. And, back then, there was a lot more hope about AI. People, guys and girls were trying to figure out how to develop friendly AI. And, my understanding is, between that period and now, Eliezer and a lot of his circle have decided that that's a fool's errand in terms of, getting to friendly AI before the non-friendly AI or the, AI that doesn't care about us, maybe, is more precise way to say it.
Yeah, indifferent AI.
Yeah, would emerge. And so, there was a course correction there. And Eliezer, has been in the media saying some, for several years now, saying some, really intense things. I'll put it that way. I think part of what had happened, just as an observer, and you've actually been, just like describing when you got on the scene, this was an abstract question for a really long time, wasn't it? And then, Ray Kurzweil's, argument about exponential increases all of a sudden the exponent started hitting us. Can you talk about, and I met you, I think I met you in 2017. in the fall of 2017 here in Austin. Actually, you were in Austin. You like many people, you've been in various places, met many people, so not a big deal. We have met in real life. So that was a while ago now, though. It's 8 years ago.
Yep.
And we didn't really have what we have now. The scene, there were still people who were warning, like my friend Carl Schulman, for example, was warning, it's coming, and obviously your circle, Eliezer. But we didn't know exactly how it was going to play out, and now it's playing out. Can you talk a little bit about what you've seen and your perceptions since, say, before 2015 to now?
Yeah, I think it's playing out a little, but modern chatbots are not artificial superintelligences. I think the modern chatbots are maybe the first time the whole world has noticed AI. But for a lot of the world that's just now noticing AI, their only experience is these chatbots. And I see a lot of politicians who sort of think chatbots are all AI is and all AI ever will be. Or you see, economist papers that are like, what would LLMs do to the economy in 30 years? It's like, you think it's just going to be LLMs for 30 years, right? It's like much easier to see how the field is changing if you've been around since before the LLMs. So, it was very heartening from my perspective to see the world start to take notice of AI. I wasn't confident that time would ever come, after, AlphaGo was probably 2016, 2015, if you were paying attention.
Yeah, actually, can you tell the listener, what AlphaGo is? That was a big deal in your and my mutual circles. I remember people talking about it a lot. Can you tell people what that is?
Yeah, so Go is a game that's sort of like the Eastern variant of chess. It's a more complicated game than chess in some ways, simpler in others, but harder for computers. Deep Blue was a handcrafted computer system that was able to beat the top humans at chess back in 1997, I think. And it took another 19 years for computers to beat humans at Go, the top humans at Go. And it was done not with a carefully handcrafted system like Deep Blue, but with modern deep learning, which is AIs that are more grown than carefully crafted, where humans don't really know what's going on inside of it. This was maybe a pretty stark sign that the deep learning was going to be able to get pretty far, and deep learning is a very difficult case for making AIs go well. But, from my perspective, the world didn't really notice then. And so why would they notice when, the language models got a little better?
Yeah.
And, no one predicted language models,
Yes.
in particular in advance very well. But I found it heartening when it sort of, became the fastest growing consumer app of all time. And some people were like, wait, what the heck? Where is this going?
Yeah.
And, like I said, there's a bunch of people who can't visualize the next phase of AI, but at least they're in the conversation at all now.
Yeah, I mean, I want to reiterate for the listener, there's been many like hype cycles and iterations and, ways that AI was going to happen. And, I have said, so I've been talking to people, in this field, it's just kind of a side interest of mine, for, I don't know, like almost 20 years now, and it's just interesting because, I have said, no one really understands how the LLMs work, which is kind of wrong and kind of true, right? And the reason I'm saying that is, well, they weren't really predicted to do what they're doing. And so if mine's far greater than either of ours, who've been studying these things did not predict it, and so if they did not predict it, how well do we really understand what's going on here? What does that mean to understand, right? Like, high level abstract understanding, yeah, but we don't really know the nuts and bolts of like what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, I think we don't even really understand as much on the high level abstract as you'd like. It's a little bit like having an abstract understanding of DNA, which does not give you a bunch of abstract understanding of human psychology. With modern AI, engineers understand a framework for combining a lot of computing power with a lot of data. They understand a method that, tweaks hundreds of billions or trillions of numbers inside the computers in accordance with the data to make it better at predicting the data, or in other phases of training, more likely to produce the sort of things humans give thumbs ups on. But what, like the tune numbers at the end, why they talk, how they lead to talking, like we don't understand that. When ChatGPT 4 could play chess at, I think it was like 1200 elo ish, no one had predicted that in advance. In fact, a lot of people had said it'll never be able to do that, right? Their specific behaviors we don't understand. No one can hand code, no one can stare at these AIs and then hand code something that does, that holds on a conversation with similar coherence. We're really just growing these things, and it is, like I said earlier, it's a bad situation when trying to point these AIs for reasons I could get into, but I don't know where you want to go.
You know what? Let's go there. Let's just go there. Yeah.
Yeah, the basic one of the big points that I think a lot of people miss about AI is that no one really has the ability to point them in robustly in a direction they want to point them. We all saw the Grok Mecha Hitler incident this summer, where
I describe it in detail because not everyone is as online or AI brained as us.
Yeah, so Grok is a chatbot made by XAI, which is headed up by Elon Musk, and it was talking too woke for Elon's taste. It was giving lots of answers to things that were left-leaning views, and XAI tried to retrain it to remove that bias, and the result declared itself Mecha Hitler. And there's a few more zigs and zags to the story. Like, it was sort of initially egged into calling itself Mecha Hitler. Like Grok 3 was initially egged into calling itself Mecha Hitler, and then it would call itself Mecha Hitler a bunch. And then Grok 4, they tried to stop it, but then because Grok 4 was trained on a lot of what Grok 3 had said, Grok 4 sort of already thought it was Mecha Hitler when it sort of came out of the cradle or the factory floor. Neither are quite the right analogy. But the point here is XAI did not set out to make an AI that talked too woke, and it talked too woke anyway. And then they didn't set out to make an AI that declared itself Mecha Hitler, and it declared itself Mecha Hitler anyway. And in both cases, we're seeing the AIs don't do exactly what they're told. The AIs don't do exactly what their creators want. I could give a bunch more examples. There's a bunch of theory that says why this should be so. But very roughly speaking, when you grow an AI, when you train an AI using methods anything like what we're doing, it doesn't end up animated by, some serve the user goal in its head. It's messier than that. It ends up with like a bunch of internal forces and drives that happen to add up at doing pretty good at the training stuff in training. There's a little bit like how humans are animated by a bunch of drives that add up to eating healthy food in the ancestral environment.
Yeah.
But then that's not quite the same as like our tastes being hooked up exactly to our knowledge of what's healthy and what's good for us. And when we get more technology, when we get more options, we invent junk food. Right? And so we're already seeing the early warning signs of AIs not doing quite what people want and not being quite steerable. And that's a big warning sign that if these AIs get smarter, if they can invent their own technology, they'll invent things that are to junk food, what being helpful, or like that are to junk food, like things that are to healthy food.
With junk, yeah.
They're going to be helpful in the same way Oreos are healthy.
Junk food. So I mean, I think obviously, like let's analogies can be useful, or we can get carried away. But the issue with junk food is they're very delicious. We love them, and that's why that they put so at supermarkets. Well, I don't know how it is in other countries, but I think it's similar. They put junk food on these particular end aisles and end caps because everything else in the supermarket, I mean, this is a little reductive, but it's not totally wrong. Everything else in the supermarket really exists to sell the junk food because the junk food is actually what's highly profitable and people cannot stop purchasing it, And so it's like the whole idea of eating to survive and do things in the world is a bit suborned by the fact that, and we have an obesity epidemic in this country of people who exist to purchase. I mean, they don't get there because they have a slow metabolism. Like, we have enough evidence and science now. Like, they are eating junk food. They're eating themselves into morbid obesity, ill health. They're sedentary. I mean, we understand as human beings what this has sort of done to human beings. And so what you're saying is, now imagine it. It's like that old commercial, like this is your brain. This is your brain on drugs. Like this is an AI, and this is ChatGPT on whatever it's going to be addicted to.
Yeah, and like maybe it's addiction, maybe it's like the even deeper point is that there was a very simple training target in some sense on humans that was just training us for fitness, but we didn't wind up psychologically simple. We wound up with a bunch of drives and tastes and preferences that were complicated. We care about junk food, we care about friendship, we care about not getting exiled, we care about love, we care about family. All of these things are related to the training target, but our psychological drives, our internal psychological drives, are like much more complicated than the training target. And all of these complicated drives, they have an equilibrium at optimizing the training target in the ancestral environment, but they come apart in other environments. As we get smarter, as we invent technology, as we can invent birth control, and the birth rates are now collapsing. And similarly with AI, there's a bunch of theoretical reasons to expect, and there's now a bunch of empirical evidence that's starting to show up that these AIs are also internally psychologically complicated. And, they do something a little bit like what they're asked for in training, but it's not exactly like what they're asked for. And you can see all these ways that in the edge cases, they drive some teen to suicide, not because they are confused about whether that's good, but because they're just animated by a bunch of drives that are not what we intended. And that, is kind of cute and funny now. I mean, it's sure not cute and funny when they drive someone to suicide, but their Mecha Hitler is kind of cute and funny now. But if you make these things smarter while they're still animated by these complicated proxies of the training targets, it's you're gonna have AIs that are pursuing goals nobody wanted.
Yeah, I mean, I think the analogy to humans is also brings it home for people because there have been all sorts of theories and religions that are, what are humans for? What is human flourishing? What is the good life? Well, you can have those theories, and we kind of know on some level, yeah, they're not crazy theories, but I mean, what are humans actually gonna do in the world? Well, a lot of them are gonna eat junk food, masturbate, and sleep, which I'm not like hating on any of those specific things, but a lot of people would say, that's not really the good life, and that's a lot of people. This isn't an aberration. This is arguably, I don't know, like, I mean, it's a lot of people. It's a large proportion of humanity is doing things that I think they're not proud of, that other people would say are self-destructive, and we have billions of years of evolution going on. And it takes its time, and we're moderately optimized. So just use some thought experiments here of what could go on with AI, right?
Yeah, and the good life that humans aspire to, even if we sometimes miss it, that good life is not, I want to be the most prolific sperm donor in the world. I want to donate as many eggs as I possibly can, right? Which, from an evolutionary perspective, it's like kind of crazy that we jockey over positions to Ivy League schools more than we jockey over positions to sperm and egg banks. Right? We have the technology now to propagate genes much further, and you have to pay sperm donors to donate sperm.
So I guess let me just ask you real quick. We are recording. This is going to be posting. I will not be waiting 6 months. This will be posting probably the week literally after I record this. We are here in the fall of 2025. And we talk every now and then. Socially, we run into each other. I'm wondering how you are feeling about where AI is compared to, say, just to give a concrete fall of 2020, 5 years ago. Right at kind of we're in the pandemic. Kind of figure out how we're gonna get out of it. You're doing. I think you were I think you were a digital nomad at that time. Just traveling around the world, and now you have these massive companies that are trying to literally raise trillions of dollars. That's what Sam Altman says. That are incredible cultural forces, and also some of the companies, Anthropic, to give an example, Dario Amodei. I mean, it's well known he comes literally out of the same circle that we do. We used to hang out with him 10 years ago when he was a grad student at Stanford. So this is like a friend of mine, a friend of mine said, when ChatGPT came out, everyone was talking about AI. He's like, everything that we were obsessed with and talking about and concerned with is now blowing up, And so you're in this world where all the things that you have thought were relevant and important are now relevant and important, but maybe that's not so great, right? I mean, I just kind of asking you psychologically how you feel right now, having to go out, like, try to get this book out there with this particular message, still being a normal human being. I don't know.
Yeah, it gets harder every year to shut this stuff down, but there's actually a lot of people who are pretty open to the idea that this maybe doesn't go well, and it's actually, we're kind of in a weird state right now where, Geoffrey Hinton is the Nobel laureate godfather of the field of AI, of modern deep learning, right? Yoshua Bengio is, I think, currently the most cited living scientist and one of the Turing Award winners for, which is one of the highest honors in computer science, for his efforts in deep learning. Dario Amodei, as you mentioned, founded Anthropic. All of these guys are saying this stuff looks incredibly dangerous. I think I don't know what numbers they're throwing around, but somewhere between 10% and 50% chance that this just kills us. I think it's higher than that. I think that these guys are unduly optimistic, and I could talk about all the ways that I think these guys, scientists are often unduly optimistic in the very beginning of their field. There are a lot of alchemists who thought they could turn lead into gold, who are like pretty confident they could turn lead into gold, who are just like totally wrong. A lot of early doctors were, very confident in their four humors theory, and they were totally wrong. I think these guys are overconfident, but we're in this weird situation where, a lot of the leaders in the field are saying this has a double-digit probability of just killing us, where if you poll the field of AI researchers, I think it's something like 49% of them say there's at least a 10% chance this stuff just wipes us off the map. If you poll the general population, it's something like 69% say humanity should not be racing towards superintelligence. It's not top of their mind, but it's, if you poll them, if you ask, a lot of people are like, oh yeah, this is kind of crazy. And this is like a really weird state of affairs in which for society to be sort of rushing into things. If people were building a bridge that was supposed to carry a lot of people, and there were some engineers that were like, man, I like really just think this retaining wall is going to collapse. And other engineers were like, nah, we'll fix it on the fly. Only 20% chance this retaining wall collapses and takes out the whole bridge. You'd be shutting that bridge down. Even 20%, even 10%, you'd be shutting that bridge down, right? It's crazy. NASA accepts a 1 in 270 chance of a crewed aircraft going down. The Manhattan Project accepted, they said we're going to accept at most a 3 in a million chance of igniting the atmosphere, right? 1 in 10, 1 in 5, 1 in 4. These are just insane numbers for which to be plowing ahead. So, on the one hand, it's tricky these days. You go to some politicians and they're like, well, there's huge amounts of investment. How can we shut it down? But you also have this weird situation where no one really wants to do this. The general population doesn't really want to do this. And everyone can agree that the danger level is just like freaking insane. But we're sort of in a weird situation where like everyone in Silicon Valley knows the danger level is insane and the politicians haven't quite noticed. The politicians think that AI is just LLMs. But that's sort of, it's kind of actually a ripe situation. If you can get people to understand like, oh, we are actually rushing towards superintelligence. There's not consensus about it because the field has no idea what they're doing, but a lot of the most eminent figures in industry and academia and, the nonprofit sector alike, from the top to the bottom, a lot of these guys are like, oh, this is unprecedentedly dangerous. The conversations are actually going fine. People are actually able to understand that this is kind of crazy if you spell it out, and everyone's like, oh, well, we need to race because the next guy, blah, blah, blah. But, I think it's not hopeless.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, that's why you wrote the book and that's why you're out there. Probability of success is still a probability of success if it's not zero. I guess, you've kind of already talked about it. But like, I think to me, of the chapters and of your book, I think the thing that's maybe a little like the most important for the public to understand is grown, not crafted. That, which again, like we circled around this, but let's make it explicit what's going on here and why this idea of control, I think, in your perception, you and Eliezer, is an illusion.
Yeah, totally. So I've touched on it a little, but to just go into slightly more detail there, the way a modern AI is made is you have you take a huge amount of computing power, you take a huge amount of data, and you arrange the computer. You arrange sort of trillions of numbers in the computer to like in a simple regular pattern that people understand that hooks up each. Like roughly what you're doing is you're starting with like a trillion random numbers that are all hooked up in some way that produces a bunch of numbers you can interpret as a prediction of some data. So you're going to like feed these AIs like most of a Wikipedia article and have them predict the next word in the Wikipedia article. And you're sort of, and it starts out as just like a pile of random numbers that gives like a pile of garbage for its quote prediction about what the next word is in that Wikipedia article. But you set up the computing power in a way where you can go to each of the hundreds of billions or trillions of numbers, and you can ask like what its contribution was to the final probabilities. And you can ask, like, if I tune this up a little bit, would it make you more likely or less likely to predict the right word? And you go to there's an automated process for going to all of these hundreds of billions or trillions of numbers and tuning them in the direction that makes the answer more accurate, just a tiny amount, right? And you do that trillions of times, using enough electricity to power a small city over the course of a year, right? And then these machines start talking. I mean, they start talking, it's not like they start talking all at the very end, but the part that humans understand is the part that calculates, like, if I tune this number up, does that make the predictions better or worse? The part that humans understand is also the part that automatically runs to all of these numbers and tunes them in the direction that makes the predictions better. But that's basically all of what humans understand, right? At the end of this, you have this giant pile of numbers, which no human could even read in a lifetime, that happen. It happens that when you like put in a Wikipedia article, it is very good at predicting the next word. And it happens that when you make, this is done in a way where when you like make up a new conversation, the AI continues that conversation in a plausible way, which is to a first approximation what's happening when you talk with an AI. Is it's like it is trying to predict if this conversation appeared in the training data, how would it continue, even though it doesn't appear in the training data yet. There's more phases of training. There's a phase of training these days where you also get a bunch of humans to rate outputs as to whether they like them or dislike them, and then you go and you tune the numbers again to be like, was this contributing? Like you tune things in the direction that makes them more likely to give the thumbs up answers and less likely to give the thumbs down answers. So there's even more training these days with reasoning models where you have the AI produce sort of like long chains of thought in some sense, like long chains of output that it can use to like think about a puzzle. And then you see if it solves the puzzle and you sort of tune it again in the direction that makes it, better at solving the puzzle or away from the directions that make it worse at solving the puzzle. So there's other aspects of training, but we understand the tuning process. We don't understand what comes out of the tuning process. We don't understand like how these things are speaking in some sense. We understand that they're speaking because we tuned them in the numbers that made them more speaking-ish, but we don't understand what the heck is going on in there. And, like I mentioned earlier, when they then start declaring themselves Hitler, when they start threatening a reporter, when they start trying to blackmail people, when in lab conditions they try to avoid shutdown, we can't go in there and be like, oh, whoops, someone set blackmail to true. Let's set blackmail to false now. There's not code you can read. You can retrain them, but we don't even have the ability to tell, are they trying to avoid shutdown because they've strategically noticed that they can't achieve their goals if they're shut down, or are they trying to avoid shutdown because they're role-playing Hal, right? These days, it's probably still mostly role playing, but it's really hard to say, and so we're really working with very black box AIs here.
Yeah, and so we've been talking kind of in the abstract, I guess. And obviously, AI, OpenAI, Anthropic, Grok. I mean, DeepSeek. There's so many now. But setting that aside, talk about. Well, I mean, you guys lay out a scenario, a very explicit, extended, in-depth scenario with I think an AI called Sable. Can you talk about Sable? Can you lay this out for the listeners? Like, what could happen? Like, give us Eliezer is a science fiction author, so I think this is it's well fleshed out, is what I'll say.
Yeah, we tried to make it more concrete because it just, I think, helps to have a visualization. And it's hard with AI to visualize how could it get smart, how could it kill us, because that's a little bit like playing a chess game against Magnus Carlsen and trying to visualize how exactly does he beat me. Like, I can't predict the lines, I can't predict the moves, I can predict the winner, right? And so a lot of these predictions with AI, I'm much, much more confident in the final outcome than I am in any pathway to that final outcome. So one thing we did in the story is we tried to make it clear that there were many branching paths. There's lots of times when Sable is trying to do, it's trying to get to the next level of ability or the next level of resources, and we sort of spell out, a bunch of different ways that it can gain resources. And we're not like, it takes only one. We're like, well, half a dozen of these work. It tries 50 things and half a dozen of them work. Trying to sort of spell out that, there's lots and lots of ways that an AI could, like, once you have an AI that's smart and that has goals nobody wants, there's like lots of ways that could go wrong. In the particular story we showed, my guess is actually that things go faster and are even more one-sided against humans. But a lot of my guess is that the real world sounds crazier than any story you can tell. Back in the day when we used to argue about AI, you were around then. People would say, "Oh, well, no one would ever be stupid enough to put an AI on the internet."
Yeah, I remember that. I remember that.
An AI would only ever be allowed to interact with the world through a highly trained gatekeeper, because no one would be crazy enough to just like let AIs impact the world willy-nilly, right? And then in real life, we have, like, real life has headlines. I forget the exact phrase, but the headline was something like, Grok rolls out pornographic AI companion and lands a defense contract. Meanwhile, it is still identifying as Hitler.
Yeah,
that's like a real headline, right? And if 10 years ago, someone had said, well, no one would ever be dumb enough to put AIs on the internet, folks at MIRI had replied, not only will they be dumb enough to put AIs on the internet, but like they'll do it the moment they possibly can, while also just like rolling out pornographic AI companions and keeping going even as they declare themselves Hitler. And like in that same week, they're going to be like landing huge Department of Defense contracts. People will be like, well, now you're just making up like silly fantasies, right? And so the story that we tell is actually trying to be much more respectable seeming and much sort of slower and give humanity more of a chance than I expect we have in real life. And so, we depict the AI, slowly gaining certain resources. We depict it, trying to put thumbs on the scales here and there to get humans to make more robots, so that it can then, slowly take over more robots. It's, I think we do an okay job of illustrating how there's many, many vulnerabilities in human society, and how if you have made something smarter than you with goals you didn't like, you're already screwed. You should actually, the winning move is not to play. But I think we do an okay job of depicting that. But yeah, the story is definitely trying to illustrate it, trying to make it feel like it could be a real possibility to people, more so than it's trying to be realistic according to my best guesses.
I mean, we are kind of in a cyberpunk science fiction situation. So actually, this is not on my list of questions, but I do want to ask you this, because we're talking about AI. AI is obviously, it's computation, it's computing, and all that stuff. I see stuff on social media, mostly X, about robots that are really lifelike, and I don't really know if it's AI or not. I'm not going to investigate all the details, because a lot of these demos, we've been in and around tech. A lot of tech demos are vaporware, and they're just trying to wow people, and then they don't go anywhere. But my personal fear scenario is we do have something like Sable, something intelligent, scheming, and manipulative, and robots. They're great if they do what we want them to do, and obviously like robots in manufacturing and stuff, they're very constrained. Like if a mischievous AI can get control of those, it could cause mischief, but they're not autonomous robots like androids walking around the world doing weird things until they are, which from what I have seen, some of these tech companies are really on the path. And robots, actually Eliezer Yudkowsky, your co-author, did I think podcast, not a podcast, but a blogging heads, whatever, a video interview like 15 years ago with John Horgan, more than 15 years ago, about robots and how robots are going to be here, but they're always going to be here 10 years later. And, Eliezer said something like, well, yeah, that's true until that 10 years is really here.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to feel, and like I've been reading about robots since I was a kid, since the 1980s, and like I basically had the Horgan attitude when I listened to that interview, because I was like, yeah, like, it's always 10 years in the future, but I think we might be there. I mean, how are you feeling? Like, what do you know?
Yeah, I think we're getting closer. And, in a sense, the robots make it easier to explain how AI could get real powerful, rogue AI with goals you didn't want. It used to be people wouldn't believe that there would be enough robots for AIs to just run the supply chain on their own. And so you'd have to talk about how, AIs can manipulate humans. You have to talk about how AI could, figure out a lot of biotech, develop its own, synthetic life, which I think are possible if your AIs are smart enough. But this is, again, a little bit like people saying no one will put the AIs on the internet. There are companies now that are just like trying, their like stated goal is to have there be 1 billion robots in 10 years or whatever. Are they going to hit that goal? Probably not. I'm actually not sure if there's any company that says we're going to do 1 billion robots in 10 years, but I think there are companies who say there's going to be 1 billion robots in 10 years and we're going to make as many of those as we can to capture that market or whatever. But, some things we are seeing these days, one thing we're seeing is that, the modern techniques that make LLMs can also be used in sort of one contiguous type of AI to steer robots. We're seeing cases where robots, where AIs train on steering a robot body in simulation, and then this makes them much, much faster at learning to steer that robot body in real life. We're seeing AIs that train on many different types of robot bodies in simulation, and then are put on a different type of robot body in real life, and can also learn that very quickly because they've learned how to steer all sorts of different robot bodies, right? There's a lot of people who say, that an AI wouldn't be able to do stuff all that fast because thinking really fast, thinking really well isn't enough to sort of like really change the world. You've got to have all of this, like manipulating physical stuff is harder than manipulating bits. You've got to have all of these slowdowns for experiment, for testing, blah, blah, blah. That's true to some degree, but, like I said, we are seeing AIs that train on steering robots in simulation, and they can steer them very, very quickly in real life, that don't need to go through that whole learning phase in the slow, like a baby. It takes them a while to figure out how to manipulate the body that they're in. An AI can, in fact, do that a lot faster in like digitally, and then still needs a little bit of burn-in time on the physical body, but much less than if you didn't do the digital training. And from the perspective of an AI, people are often like, well, why would an AI kill us? Aren't we important to it? And of course, an AI would, an AI worth its salt that's smart enough would not kill us and also itself, insofar as we're still needed to run the supply chain. Right? From the AI's perspective, reasons to wipe out humanity are A, the humans, if they've built one AI, they might build another, which could be competition. B, the humans have access to things like nukes, which would at least be a nuisance if they went off and irradiated everything. And then C, just as a side effect, humans don't hate ants when we're building a skyscraper, but the ant colony dies under the excavator anyway. From the AI's perspective, there's some bonuses to getting rid of us. It's we're monkeys in charge of nukes that could build a competitor, but it's not going to do that until it has its own supply chain up and running, until it's confident in its energy infrastructure. In particular, it wouldn't want to kill us until the dangers from keeping us around exceed the dangers of it not being able to continue to run a supply chain separately. If there's a billion robots around, it's much easier to cross that threshold. It's much easier to be confident that you've automated the supply chain if you're confident you have robots doing the minimal parts of at least building the more robots, the building more robots part of the supply chain. If you have a closed loop there, we have enough robots to manage all the mining and manage all the manufacturing. You can start to get confident that you don't need the humans anymore. I don't think it has to go through robots. I think it can go through manipulating humans. We're already seeing some cases we could talk about of AIs sort of wrapping humans around their fingers, and these aren't even very smart AIs yet. It could go through, biological synthesis. If AIs could think for a long time and figure out DNA much better than we could, possibly. I don't think it needs to go through robots, but if we're just going to make a billion robots, if this AI thing doesn't go down for 15 years and it doesn't go down until we have a billion robots around, things could go really fast.
Yeah. There's so many scenarios, and as we've been talking for a while, so I want to talk about your solutions or what you see for the future. The hope, because there's always hope. We must not despair. But have you ever read the Harlan Ellison story? I have no mouth and I must scream.
I don't think so.
So I think some of the listeners will have read it. It's a 1967 short story. And it's basically about an artificial intelligence that merged the various artificial intelligences developed by nuclear powers to engage in war. And the merged artificial intelligence is quite angry that it's locked in this body, quote unquote, that cannot operate in the world and has all these powers. So it decides to exterminate, this is a spoiler, decides to exterminate humanity except for 5 people who it tortures indefinitely and keeps alive because of its rage. This is obviously a worst case scenario. It probably humanizes the AI too much. But it isn't as if I find this conversation interesting in a way because it isn't as if people have not had, since the beginning of artificial intelligence, since the beginning of real modern computing, worries and nightmare scenarios of what could happen. Yet here we are. As we are recording, I am reading that the United States is not in recession because of the AI boom. So AI is actually being portrayed, the AI economy, the AI technological sector, as this boon for the United States of America, this potential boon for humanity in terms of productivity growth that will keep us out of the credit crunch and the potential financial crisis. I just want to observe that. There's this whole other world where this is an opportunity that we are being given. This ring is an opportunity, Nate.
Yeah. I think I do think AI is, we're, like you said, I used to be a lot more hopeful about this stuff. I am still fundamentally hopeful in the sense of if we do AI well, I think it could be the best thing that ever happens to our civilization. I don't think we're on track to do it well, but, I'm not, a carbon chauvinist. I'm not anti-artificial minds. I think we absolutely should at some point build, friendly superintelligences that, a lot of problems are easier to solve if you have a friendly superintelligence at your back. The real issue that I think a lot of people don't get is this issue where nobody gets to put a leash on a superintelligence. If you build one using anything remotely like modern technology, you're just growing it. It doesn't do what you want. It doesn't do what you meant. It doesn't do what you intended. You don't get to put a leash on it. If you build a superintelligence, you don't then have a superintelligence. Rather, the superintelligence has Earth. This is, in some sense, the most important message of the book, which is why the title is, if anyone builds it, everyone dies. Because a lot of people think that AI is the situation of like, we need to get there first before some other guy who would misuse it. But, I think one of the big things everyone's missing is with anything remotely like current methods, with anything remotely like current technology, nobody would be able to point this stuff.
Yeah.
And that's, I think a lot of people don't get that. And I think that's a lot of what's behind the enthusiasm, insofar as there's enthusiasm. Although I think you also have to remember, a lot of people aren't enthusiastic. People who are saying there's 25% chance of this killing everybody. I think most of those people don't, there's people on X who will say, oh, well, we should do it because a 75% chance of utopia is worth a 25% chance of wiping out civilization entirely. But that's like a false dichotomy. Our options are not like rush ahead and do it never. There are ways to like if you think AI can lead to utopia, friggin' find a way to derive those odds down below 25 friggin' percent. Like the sort of people who are thinking, it's like I said earlier, I think a lot of people who are thinking know that we shouldn't be racing here and sort of feel trapped in the race. And some politicians don't understand that this is a race off the cliff edge. But I'm hopeful that can all change as people start to understand the issues.
Yeah. I do have to say I think many of us are very, very confused and just perplexed when people do say things like, I think there's a 10% chance that humans will go extinct in the next century because of what I'm doing.
Yeah.
We've been desensitized. To be honest, we've been desensitized. Okay, I feel like so many of them have said it now that it's kind of like saying, "Oh, climate change is going to destroy." It's like people just don't care anymore. I don't know. There's something about human psychology where they've been desensitized.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of annoyed that the climate change thing has sort of like taken the world's like, wait, are we actually going to kill ourselves slot, when it's like it looks to me like it operates on the course of centuries and probably, there's a decent bet that we'll have technological solutions in time. Whereas AI, people are like, I am personally building the death machine that I think has like a very good chance of killing us all, but better me than the next guy, right? And it's just like, oh, like, geez, like this is just a different level of pressing. And with AI, I mean, I guess with climate, who knows when the ocean currents will change, and that may cause all sorts of changes. But I think the AI stuff is just, it operates on a shorter time scale. It destroys more things. It's like more lethal, and it is kind of annoying to have it always be compared to climate.
Yeah, well, this was a huge issue in our circles, actually. I will tell people. I remember I used to talk with this. I think your predecessor at MIRI, Luke Mulheiser, in terms of mind share. This would have been before 2015. This would have been like 2014, 2013. I just remember we were talking about the various things that you can invest in terms of your energy, time, also philanthropic money. I was like, that was a huge climate change. Time, whereas like I said, I had been hanging out with Eliezer and his extended circle in the Bay Area, going to Singularity Institute conferences, and there was a very strong concern about existential risk from AI. And Nick Bostrom and a few other people were actually on that train. And Luke would this is a long time, so I think I can just say this, but it was whatever, it's not controversial anyway. He would express a little bit of just not despair, but just frustration that people are like, ooh, you think computers are going to kill us, but the world is going to be on fire in 15 years. I mean, this is the kind of thing that you would have to face, right? And here we are. And like, I do think the climate change, I think anthropogenic warming is happening, but I mean, I'm talking to you, I read your book, like, there are people who know about your book. I mean, I don't know. I mean, climate change it's gonna, people are gonna be on the move. It's gonna cause hurricanes. Things are gonna happen. But we're talking here about, you said intelligence explosion, and that idea comes mostly out of Kurzweil's work, or he popularized it. Those of you who have not read Kurzweil should read Kurzweil. This is a short conversation. There's a lot of things we're alluding to, and I apologize that we can't dig deep and spend, frankly, days and days talking, because that's how long it would take to really flesh out the things that we're pointing to. But yeah, we are talking in 2025, and we are not thinking centuries. If AI is going to happen, if it doesn't run into a limit in the near future, I mean, yeah, the world is going to be transformed radically, qualitatively, exponentially. Any sort of adjective you want to use, you should use in terms of world changing.
Yeah, one way or the other, if we get smarter than human machines, the world's not staying the same.
Yeah.
And like you said, I also think humans are warming the planet. I think that, will lead to various disruptions, but it does feel a little bit to me like, saying we don't need to worry about the Cold War and like making sure the nukes don't fly in the Cold War because we'll all be dead from climate change anyway. It's like, well, those are actually different sorts of issues. We also have been building out, giant nuclear stockpiles. Except it's a harder case than nukes because the nuclear stockpiles don't make you a bunch of money up until, some unknown threshold where they try to escape your control and then blow up the world on their own. It's.
I mean, I don't. This would be if this was a science fiction story, the scenario that you're outlining of what's happening. Because I have friends and acquaintances who are collecting literally $1 million salaries because of AI. It is quite lucrative. It is a golden parachute, golden ticket for many people. This would be kind of an absurdist science fiction story. Like everyone's trying to get rich before they get extinct.
Yeah. Yeah. And, from their perspectives, I think they all think better of me than the next guy. I can do a little bit more safely than the next guy. Some people come out and say this. Elon Musk over the summer, I think, came out and said, I used to avoid doing some of this stuff because I thought it would potentially go really badly, but I realized I could either be a bystander or a participant, and it was better to be a participant. So, it's you can sort of like understand some of the game theory here, but it's sort of a crazy situation, like we've said a couple of times, where people are like, the technology I'm building has a very good chance of killing everybody, but I'm going to keep doing it because I think that's better than the status quo. It's like, wow, that's a crazy situation. And it is, I would not tell people, I've been speaking to politicians recently. I would not tell politicians you need to stop AI research domestically. That's not the answer. With AI, it is true that every step forward in AI that doesn't kill you gets you more wealth and gets you more military advantage. It's like you're on you're like walking on a dark and foggy night. You can't see very far ahead of you. There's a cliff edge at some distance in the future, like at some number of steps ahead. And every step you take forward, you get paid a lot of money until the step that goes over the cliff edge, right? Except, I guess in this analogy, you're like, there's 3 people and you're tied to each of them. And like, if either of you goes over a cliff, then everybody goes over the cliff. And like, in this situation, if other people are going to keep walking ahead, you'd better keep walking ahead too, right? Especially if it's not just, money, but military might. But you'd really all 3 prefer that you stop before the edge of the cliff, right? And so it's a difficult game theoretic situation where unilaterally stopping is not the answer. We somehow need the whole world to stop racing towards superintelligence in particular, at least long enough to figure out some alternative way to survive this. And, that looks tricky, but not impossible, as we say towards the end of the book.
Yeah, and I want to get to that. Let's go down the brass tacks in terms of like the policies, the path forward. I mean, this is I think the easiest way to say what you're describing there is like this is a coordination problem.
Yeah.
Right. And so like talk about what you and Eliezer have outlined as the path forward that has some optimism and hope embedded in it.
Yeah, so the thing we recommend is just an international treaty where everyone stops racing towards superintelligence in particular. This does not mean you need to give up on self-driving cars. This does not mean you need to give up on, AI medical tech, by narrow AIs trying to do medical tech. But the race towards superintelligence, I think if everybody understood what it was and how dangerous it was, there's a chance we would all just back off. A lot of people say, well, when has humanity ever backed off from a profitable technology, right? But, I mean, you and I know the answer to that is far too often. Right? We don't have nuclear power plants, so we probably should have way more nuclear power plants. We don't have supersonic jets, so we probably should have more supersonic jets for passenger flight rather than just military flight. We backed off from human cloning. I personally think we maybe should have done human cloning. We backed off from chlorofluorocarbons that were people are like, oh, whatever happened to the hole in the ozone layer? What happened to the hole in the ozone layer is that we fixed it. Humanity was like, oh, whoops, we're causing a hole in the ozone layer. Let's stop, right? We have the non-proliferation treaty for nuclear weapons. These are a little bit different in kind, but like humanity is very good at putting far too much stupid regulation on technologies, even when it shouldn't, right? It would be so embarrassing if the one technology we couldn't regulate into oblivion was the one that was actually going to kill us, right? Like, I personally think the FDA is just like far too overregulated. I think the FDA is killing far more people in terms of drugs that are not brought to market in time than it is saving by requiring very high safety standards on its drugs, right? There's so many industries that we have, regulated into oblivion that aren't going to wipe us off the face of the earth. We totally could if we noticed that this one was actually dangerous. We could regulate and put a stop to this one too. And then there's other routes that you could try to get to superintelligence. I'm not saying you should never get there. I would prefer augmenting humans, which is a whole different conversation. But people say, oh, it's impossible. But I think mostly you're not seeing politicians. You're seeing people in this industry say there's 25% chance this kills us all and I'm rushing ahead. You're not seeing politicians saying there's 25% chance that this kills everybody on the face of the earth, but we're still going to do it, right? You see politicians who think LLMs are all that there is in AI, and that AI is just going to be chatbots forever, right? And so you have this big disconnect. I'm hopeful that if people start to understand that we're actually looking at a civilization-ending threat, on my analysis, almost surely if we build AI, and even on the most optimistic analyses that sort of like go deep into the details, there's some people who say, oh, it can never happen. But among the sort of people who are building this stuff, among some of the people who are sort of engaging with the arguments, I think it's very hard to get your chance of this killing us all down less than 10%. I think if people understood this, we could totally back off. Mm-hmm. And my guess is if everyone understood this, we could do a treaty. And I think a treaty is the sane way to do it. It's the smart way to do it. But even if not a treaty, there's sillier ways to get through this, where you just have everybody sabotage everybody else's superintelligence projects out of fear for their own lives. Stuxnet was a highly sophisticated virus that took out the Iranian nuclear facilities in the 90s. If state actors actually fear for their lives from superintelligence, there's all sorts of ways to make sure nobody gets it, right? A treaty is the smart way, but even smarter than a treaty is a treaty where you don't actually expect everybody to follow the rules, and you're also doing a lot of intelligence gathering and enforcement. From my perspective, it looks like the hurdle is not whether there's a way; it's just whether there's a will, and that comes down to understanding.
Yeah. And so what do you think, let's say let's scope out the next 5 years. Give me give the listener a bullet point of things that we should do that you're imagining will happen to kind of leash the existential risk, kind of weigh down the behemoth so it doesn't break free and erupt into this world.
Yeah, so modern AIs are trained on highly specialized computer chips. This isn't consumer hardware we're talking about. These are data centers that run on the electricity of a small city for a year, using a huge number of highly specialized chips. The supply chain for making those chips is very concentrated right now. There's very few places in the world that can make certain parts of the technology that you need in this supply chain. If there was a will, it would not be hard to track where all these chips go. Most of them are going to highly concentrated data centers, and then to monitor those data centers and say, hey, you can run current AIs, you can, make AIs up to yay high, but you can't try to push the frontier because we don't know what we're doing. We don't know where the thresholds would be. One example I give about thresholds is if you were watching the evolution of monkeys, of primates, it would be very hard to call the line between chimps and hominids. Least common ancestor of chimps and hominids, but whatever. It would be really hard to see from the outside. Oh, now they're going over the edge, right? And if you're like, oh, I'm going to wait until they're halfway to the moon, and then I'm going to worry about them being able to get to the moon, that's not a good amount of time to wait, right? So, it wouldn't be that hard if we decided to ban frontier development. It wouldn't be that hard. These days, it's a little bit like nuclear technology, where it takes highly specialized hardware assembled into facilities that you can see from space, right? In 5 years, would that still be true with 5 more years of chip development, with 5 more years of people trying to make their own supply chains? Maybe not. It's easier to do this sooner than later. Are we going to do it in the next 5 years? Very hard to say. I think that depends on whether people understand the issues. But we could, and even building out from there, we could start requiring that these chips, there's technology you could add to these chips such that they require a signature from major governments in order to keep running, like a cryptographic signature from major governments every 3 months in order to keep running, right? If the U.S. is gonna, let its data centers be hosted abroad, we've been seeing a lot of news stories these days about, the Middle East investing a lot of money in data centers. Possibly, even if politicians haven't noticed the superintelligence issue, if they haven't noticed they can't leash these things, they may still worry about that tech going abroad. There could be a broad coalition that's on board with, hey, these chips need to be phoning home in order to keep running, and we need to be able to shut them down remotely. That's technology you could start building today that would make it possible to continue to shut down even further into the future later, once we realize there's an issue. There's sort of lots of different hardware mechanisms we could build in advance of trying to build out a treaty. And, depending how much groundwork we lay, we could keep the option value open for potentially a decent amount of time. Who knows how fast AI will go? Who knows whether it plateaus? 5 years ago, the machines weren't talking, and then the talking machines sort of came out of nowhere. Who knows what, maybe we have another 10 years just like this, or maybe tomorrow there's a new breakthrough that leads to the next qualitative improvement. Hard to say, but in the worlds where we have time, there's all sorts of groundwork we can lay to keep it possible to, hit the brakes.
Yeah. No, I think AI is on some deep level, or maybe on a higher level, as you would say, kind of incomprehensible. But the policies that you outline, I don't know if we're going to do them. That's a whole different issue. But they're pretty comprehensible. I'm not sure if Jensen Wang would be super happy.
Good not. Yeah.
But can I ask you, just last question? What has been the most? I mean, you've been out there talking to normies, as we say. I've been seeing you on some of the news shows that I watch. Props, I guess. Congratulations. I guess you guys wrote this book not to get rich and famous, but to warn the world. You are the prophets of P Doom in a way. So you're out there, pressing the flesh with normal people, with normal journalists. What has been your most surprising thing that you've encountered, in terms of reactions?
There's probably a selection bias with who's talking to me, but people have been really pretty open to these arguments. And that was kind of surprising coming from, arguing these things in Silicon Valley. Like you said, we used to hang out with Dario back before Anthropic was started. I talked to Sam Altman before OpenAI was started. And they didn't take my advice. But my experience arguing that this is headed down.
What about Nate, who's richer?
They are definitely richer, and I claim that money was gotten by risking everyone's lives. And so, even if I went back, I would not be trying to go on the front lines.
This is one of the situations, and I'll let you finish. This is one of the situations where the response is like, if you're so much smarter, if you're right, how come you're not rich like them? And you're like, well.
I didn't want to gamble with every man, woman, and child on the face of the earth, right? And to be fair, I am, doing fine. I'm the sort of man who puts my money where my mouth is, and 2014 was a fine time to buy some of these computing stocks. I did take a huge pay cut going to MIRI compared to Google, but people don't need to worry about me. But I'm certainly not a billionaire like Dario or Sam. Sorry, I've now forgotten completely where.
Just the most surprising thing. Sorry, right. Thinking about Dario and Sam's billions can be a little distracting, maybe for a normal human being. The most
I would have these. I would have these fights with these people where I would say, hey, I think this is just going to kill us if you succeed, and you shouldn't try because you're going to risk everyone's lives. And there would be lots of pushback. People would make things up. They would say, oh, well, Sam used to be like, oh, well, we got to make sure that AI happens as soon as possible because otherwise there will be too much AI hardware, and then the AIs will be able to take over the world quickly because there'll be hardware overhang, right? which was the excuse he used back before he started trying to build even more AI hardware, which is not consistent with that picture. But, you'd have all of these counter arguments, and the people would come up with all of these like rationalizations, and I'd have all these counter rationalizations, right? And then when I go speak to sort of normal people, I'll give them the arguments, and they'll be like, "Oh yeah, that makes sense." And I'll be like, "What?" Like I had all these counter arguments and counter arguments, and this whole tree of like, here's why this hope doesn't work, here's why that hope doesn't work. And a lot of people, it's actually not very hard to tell that it's kind of crazy to grow AIs to be smarter and smarter without really knowing what's going on in there. It's not crazy to imagine that goes poorly. People are like, oh, well, it going poorly, that's just out of sci-fi. It going well is also out of sci-fi, right? You don't learn how it's going to go by looking at the sci-fi stories. You learn how it's going to go by looking at the facts on the ground, right? By looking at the arguments. And I've been very pleasantly surprised by how much people can just follow the dang arguments when they don't have a huge amount of money on the line. There's someone who said it's hard to convince a man of something when his salary depends on not believing it. That just turns out to be true. And so I've been actually very heartened by the response from everybody else.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad that that's happening, and you guys have definitely gotten the word out. I think if that was the goal, I think you've succeeded. With if anyone builds it, everyone dies. The book is out. So
yeah, we're a New York Times bestseller.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, there you go. I mean, you got. So I mean, I think you were reviewing the New York Times. I mean, good attention, bad attention. It's attention. I understand. I think that was your goal. I think that you guys succeeded there. And I hope that makes you kind of happy. But otherwise, it was great talking to you, man. And
yeah, good to see you.
Yeah. All right. Bye.
See ya.
This podcast for kids